And so as a graduate student, I get a lot of really specialized training in how to do one very specific thing. But the Engage program gives students at UW this really unique opportunity to talk about science in a way that's engaging, enlightening, and informative. So you can learn more about our innovative program at engage-science.com. So I'd also like to mention that the best way to keep up with Town Hall's program is to become a member. So membership offers down-front seating, discounts on book and ticket purchases, and a mailed copy of Town Hall's monthly calendar. And it provides the support essential to bringing you more than 400 events annually at affordable ticket price. So now we're going to have our second guest, who is John Trochta. He's at the School of Aquatic and Fisheries Sciences at UW, and he's going to explain that herring, which are a common canned snack, are also a critical source of food for other animals and income for fishing communities. So he's going to talk about the far-reaching effects and impacts of changing abundance in the ocean, and whether or not we should be worried about low numbers of this critical resource. So please give a warm welcome to John Trochta.
Thanks, Max. So as Max said, today I'm talking herring by the numbers. I lived in the upper Midwest for most of my life, having grown up in northern Wisconsin and going to college in northern Michigan, until about a year and a half ago when I moved out here. Living in these rural Northwoods meant doing activities such as hunting and fishing, which inspired my personal passion to do for natural resource management issues. I was familiar with living resources such as white-tailed deer, or walleye, and other freshwater fish, but had more lofty aspirations for marine fish issues. I saw marine fishes as resources of broad and intense significance in global ecology, economies, politics, and culture, and affecting millions of people worldwide. I found my marine fish opportunity with herring at the University of Washington, but having been a freshwater fish guy my entire life, I only really knew herring as this. And I imagine many of us may associate with herring in this form. But as I came to discover through my research, the backstory behind this jar, specifically the resource contained within this jar, is deeply rooted within human history and ecology. Through the ages, herring has been a significant source of value in trade, a significant source of culture through art and tradition, but also a source of conflict through competing fishing nations. But probably most importantly, it has been a symbol of abundance, of a bountiful ecosystem that provides for the well-being of entire civilizations. So when I joined the conversation at herring as a fisheries management graduate student, I first came to perceive that we are talking about a resource that's unique in its seemingly infinite proportions. For example, I was truly amazed at this picture. It shows a record herring catch in Sitka, Alaska, where the purported tonnage of this catch was greater than 1,000 metric tons, or to give some context, the average adult elephant weighs about 5 metric tons. So this is another astounding photo that I came across that shows a herring spawning event outlined in red. And these white clouds are sperm, which we also call milt, and adult males release this into the open coastal waters to fertilize the eggs that coat the rocky bottoms of these waters. These spawning events occur annually and reflect such amazing magnitudes, they dwarf coastal islands and mountain ranges. So, herring once described to me as a quantum species, which I initially took to mean a concept of unimaginable scale, such as infinity. But while herring are plentiful, they are not unlimited. They are a resource of limits, of absolute numbers. To show this, I grabbed this graph from the seaaroundus.org, which shows the global total catches of fishes by year from 1950 to 2010. Each color band is a proportion of a certain fish group contributing to this total catch, such as light green for tuna fishes and dark red for perch-like fishes. But for now, I want you to ignore most of these colors, except for this color right here in orange in the middle. These are herring, and as you can see, they are a significant component of the global fish resources or fisheries that we exploit. And on a relative scale, herring comprise approximately 10% of the global total fish catch. This weight is approximate to greater than 1 million elephants worldwide, and values at around $300 million US. The fish, not the elephants. So while North American populations of herring greatly contribute to this global herring catch, herring are naturally distributed worldwide, where larger populations and catches occur elsewhere. This distribution naturally splits between two species of herring, Atlantic and Pacific herring. The locations marked here are individual populations for which I have data on and for which are also fished. While different in terms of species, Atlantic and Pacific herring are otherwise very similar in various characteristics, such as their appearance, where and when they spawn, and what they feed on. But now, my research, which is what you all came here to listen to me talk about. So far, I have emphasized this concept of intense abundance of herring and their importance. But naturally, I'm concerned about the contra scenario. When we see low numbers of herring, which often signals what is known as population collapse. This concern is motivated by prominent herring collapse in the fisheries world. And this is the collapse of the herring in Prince William Sound, located in the central Gulf of Alaska. Prince William Sound is a truly beautiful environment, so I've been told. I've never been there. But it also is the epitome of wildlife diversity, a dynamic food web, and a living ecosystem altogether. Herring have a major role in this ecosystem. Life across the Prince William Sound is supported by herring at all stages of its own life. This triangle shows that just adult herring, at the upper end of it, are what humans harvest, but also what birds and marine mammals such as sea lions feed on. But it's not just adult herring that are a major food source for wildlife. Spawning adults lay down massive blankets of eggs in intertidal areas that are visible to other predators, including fishes and various other birds. And surviving eggs lead to far fewer larvae, which are not visible to any big predators, but still a tasty food source for animals such as jellyfish and zooplankton. But as herring grow in size, they catch the eyes of larger predators once again, and larger fishes such as salmon, until once again they are fed upon by the largest of the largest, such as humpback whales and sharks. And altogether, when herring are around, they allow for breadth in the food web and the ecosystem. The numerous interactions they provide again emphasizes yet another facet of abundance in nature. But why do they provide so much breadth in the food web? Well, reason being is that herring can be considered nature's power plant. They consume energy-dense zooplankton and are thus comprised of energy-rich fats or lipids. And given how herring concentrate in large schools, they act as a rich, concentrated source of fat and food for all sorts of predators, in the water and out of the water. Prince William Sound herring and ecosystem they are part of are unique in this and various other natural aspects. But unfortunately, there was one very unnatural aspect that also makes Prince William Sound a unique ecological case study scenario. And that is this, the Exxon Valdez oil spill of 1989, which caused this, and then a lot of this, and this. Wildlife casualties amounted to the hundreds of thousands for seabirds and tens of thousands for marine mammals. But for herring, a lot of this was seen. Herring spawn, and I mean a lot. This highly successful spawn event was unanticipated at the time. And in fact, herring were experiencing a historical maximum in their abundance in the late 80s, which is what is shown in this graph. The oil spill that occurred in 1989 happened in March, which is at a time immediately before the adult herring migrate back into the sound to spawn. So during the winter, they spend their time out in the ocean. Fishers were not allowed to fish herring during this year, but herring activity was extraordinary. But more astonishing was that these levels of herring abundance continued for the next year and the next year until 1993, 4 years later, this happened, the red line, and the herring crashed, and they crashed hard. This collapse was fourfold in magnitude and marked the beginning of an era of low abundance in herring and a ban on fishing. The herring collapse is perhaps one of the most perplexing ecological catastrophes without any sound agreement on what actually happened. This is especially considering that herring remains one of the few unrecovered species as of 2014, along with killer whales and other birds. The debate continues as to what caused the collapse and what continues to influence it. Obviously, the oil spills connection was investigated, but no direct link was found, except some new studies have shown that there is long-term effects of oil exposure, such as in the cardiovascular fitness of juvenile herring. But in the current day, There is no more oil in open water and does not affect herring or any other wildlife. Also at the time of the collapse, the few fish that were caught were observed to be severely diseased, as evidenced by these lesions and other poor health conditions. Disease was thought to be a primary result arising from the crowded conditions at their maximum abundance levels, which would stress the fish, reduce their immunity, make them susceptible to other pathogens. Competition with other fishes in the food web is also a major idea that behind the collapse. For example, pink salmon in Prince William Sound are at an all-time high as hatcheries raise and release millions of them into the sound annually. They share the same habitats and prey as herring and may also significantly restrict their growth and survival. Along with other wildlife in the sound, they got predators to worry about. Humpback whales have been increasing drastically in the Prince William Sound for the last 30 years, and estimates of their consumption of herring may be as high as 10,000 metric tons. That's approximately 50% of the current abundance of herring in Prince William Sound. And finally, the zooplankton food supply, their prey source, also reached a historical peak in the late 80s, indicating that this was really a big boom opportunity for the herring to flourish. But following 1989, this prey source collapsed with the herring and further restricted their survival and growth. Whether any, all, or none of these suggestions have had or continue to have an impact on the current herring population, concerns have inevitably shifted towards the future. Will there ever be a time again when herring are abundant? The answer relies on a key fishery concept. Just like a strong army needs recruits to replenish its strength, so does a strong herring population need to be replenished with many young incoming fish. Recruitment in the fisheries world represents the strength or the size of the incoming cohort of young fish that are caught with fishing gear and are also able to sexually reproduce. Recruitment is usually represented as the number of 3-year-old or 4-year-old fish in the population in a given year. For Prince William Sound herring, recruitment is critical. Here, I show the Prince William Sound herring abundance trajectory in red, as before, but I also included a black line over time, which is the number of incoming recruits represented in millions of 3-year-old fish by year. What I want you to look closely at is the peaks in this recruitment. Before the 1993 collapse, or the pre-collapse period, most recruitment peaks nearly align with peaks in the large increases in adults, providing a big boost in adult population, such as around 1987 and 1991. But in the post-collapse period, the absence of large recruit events since the pre-collapse population levels meant that the population size could only be sustained at low levels. Fishery scientists have long recognized recruitment as probably the most important component in the recovery of collapsed fish populations. So what makes or breaks the strong recruitment? One would think the number of immediate eggs would matter, but as it turns out, more often than not, it has no determination for the number of eventual young recruits. However, there are a variety of other factors whose importance is recognized, but not yet accurately measured in terms of their effect on survival. To show the sequence from egg surviving to the eventual recruitment, let's first consider a bottleneck in survival, from the point herring eggs hatch to their adulthood. That would imply that eggs directly matter, but several key conditions that must align. Larval and juvenile herring are subject to intense predation, and years with low numbers of predators will allow more recruits. Ocean currents also vary in strength and direction from year to year, transporting the vulnerable juveniles from or to habitats of safety and adequate food sources. And when juveniles are transported, they may land in a location of abundant food and thrive, or little food and starve. I emphasize timing here to indicate that it's all about being at the right place at the right time. And finally, herring must survive harsh winters when they rely on their inner fat stores to persist in the next spring when they can feed again. This road to recruitment is tumultuous, but above all, it is highly unpredictable, as nature would typically have it. It challenges scientists and managers to estimate and manage the herring abundance well into the future. We cannot simply look at the Prince William Sound herring, let alone their abundance record. Context beyond Prince William Sound is needed. From within the Sound, it is easy to say that the outlook is currently dismal. Furthermore, while scientific explanation is lacking, the prolonged collapse has asserted something unique happened to Prince William Sound herring, for example, the oil spill. But however, to truly assess its uniqueness, we must draw from other examples or other herring populations. We often hear that history repeats itself, and while no other major oil spills have been shown to crash herring outside Prince William Sound, collapse and recovery have occurred in other herring populations. So, I ask, are there patterns to be drawn across these different collapse and recovery scenarios? Is there an optimism to be inspired from other populations? This outlook is what my research sets out to do. And so far, I have collected a lot of data and I'm currently analyzing it. And here is a visual of all that data I collected, and I want to demonstrate it by the numbers. So please don't focus too much on the individual lines. But to summarize this, each row represents a certain population where I split the Atlantic from the Pacific populations. In each column represents a certain historical record of abundance. For example, this first column is the catches over time. This is the adult abundance over time. And these are the recruitments over time. While numerous herring populations have been and are fished from the furthest reaches of both the Pacific and Atlantic, I only wish to focus on a few examples for my talk here. The herring populations of the Western Pacific are some of the largest in the world, and at one time were much larger. For example, the Hokkaido Sakhalin population off the coast of Japan had catches that peaked near 1 million metric tons at the beginning of the 20th century, where this red line is catches over time. This catch is nearly 50 times the current population size of the Prince William Sound herring at this time. And this is what was caught. But such continued heavy fishing did not come without its consequences, and the population crashed in the 1950s. Drastic changes in Japan's coastal habitats and ocean temperatures have also shown to influence ups and downs of herring in Hokkaido, particularly through the recruitment. 60 years later, the herring in Hokkaido remain extremely depressed, exemplifying one of the most infamous cases of herring collapse. But on our side of the Pacific, herring have demonstrated both collapse and recovery, as circled in yellow here. Several specific populations are shown, including Area 2W in southeast Alaska, a British Columbia population near Hawaii, and the Puget Sound populations right outside our back door here. Again, heavy fishing has been suggested to negatively impact many of these populations, while various aspects of their coastal habitats have changed, mostly due to human development, in a manner that they can no longer sustain such large numbers as they have in the past. In Puget Sound, while there has been a slight trending downwards in overall subpopulations, the one largest subpopulation near Cherry Point experienced a significant collapse over the last 30 years, showing a drastic collapse not unlike the Prince William Sound herring. Puget Sound herring have shown outbreaks of the same disease as shown in the Prince William Sound herring, indicating poor health conditions. And other factors such as the environment and predation may have a greater impact on their stress, making them more vulnerable to pathogens, and their survival. But rebounds have happened, such as in southeast Alaska, here, as a result of strong recruitments. Going over to the other side, in Atlantic herring, we also have seen drastic changes in herring numbers, with some notable examples of collapse and recovery from 10 to 20 years or more. The main thing I want to point out here is that absent strong recruits, shown in purple here, these lines, over time, just like the Prince William Sound herring, have prolonged the duration of their collapse. But eventually, for populations such as those off the coast of Norway, in the North Sea, and the Gulf of Maine, strong recruitment did return. For now, it appears that the alignment of the right conditions for recovery relies most on chance, a roll of dice for the Prince William Sound herring. And while 23 years of their collapse is indeed long by comparison to other herring populations, it is not necessarily a death sentence or pessimistic outlook for them. And so I'd like to bring up this idea again of herring being a quantum species. Herring aren't infinite, they are dynamic, in a constant state of flux. Norms are always changing in a radically changing environment, particularly the meaning of numbers and abundance. And despite this new norm of low abundance for Prince William Sound herring, the state of collapse is just part of the dynamic, the flux. This is expected to change at some point. In the meantime, it is crucial that we continue to study and sustainably manage all herring because humans do have an impact, where the right conditions that enable strong recruitments and recovery in populations can only happen if herring are there in the first place. And as I conclude, I wanted to bring up an experience I had last year when I attended a Pacific Herring Summit in Richmond, British Columbia. Scientists, fisheries management officials, tribal leaders, and fishers all assembled for 3 days of intense discussion on our focal fish here. A graphic illustrator visualized our conversation, which covered topics on herring status, their collapse, and our combined effort to address their sustainability. I listened to the First Nations people from British Columbia, such as the Hiltzik, who talked about their ancient relationship with the herring and how they felt slighted by recent management efforts for the current low herring abundance in British Columbia. But despite the tension in their discussion, a sense of hope came through. Terms such as stewardship, power, and rebuilding are emphasized. I witnessed the determination and resilience of the First Nations people, a trait they no doubt adopted from herring. A fish that has and will hopefully once again defy the numbers, no matter how small they currently are. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending tonight, and thanks to my sponsors, Town Hall and Engage, for providing this wonderful opportunity, my funding sources, and all the agencies that I have been collaborating with.
Thanks for that. When you had the graph with the abundance and the recruitment, what I noticed was after the collapse, there still were like peaks of recruitment. They just weren't like the magnitude that they were before the collapse. So I'm just curious, like there still is peaks and troughs of recruitment, but just not the same magnitude as there was before.
So, you wondering why that is occurring?
Yeah, I think so. Is that, I didn't get a chance to like really look at it, but is that reflected then in like a little bit of a peak of abundance?
Yes, so there's some ideas out there that Prince William Sound, there's this concept of carrying capacity where basically you have this available space or available amount of resources to support so much of a population. And they think that that has really gone down, this capacity. So you can still get strong recruits, but because it kind of caps it with less quality of habitat,
Okay.
that you won't get the historical recruits. Yeah.
Okay, so the reduced carrying capacity from habitat loss and pollution.
It's not as much habitat loss in Prince William Sound, but just how there's an interesting dynamic called change in the food web. Just more predators, more competitors to begin with, and less prey. So it's a hypothesis, but nothing else has contradicted it so far.
Thank you.
Hi. From your many graphs that you showed, it looks like the collapse of these herring populations is pretty drastic when it happens. And it sounded like for the one most recent that you studied, there's not really a consensus of why it happened. And I was just wondering, through all of the research of looking at these other collapses of herring in these other locations, if you have some insight you could share why this might happen. And the second part of that question is maybe more of a herring biology question, but for humans, sometimes an exposure that happens doesn't necessarily kill or cause disease in that generation, but maybe the offspring or the offspring's offspring. And so maybe the exposure from what happens to a herring population might not see the effect for a few generations down the line. And if that's like true in herring too, or whatever your thoughts are on why that collapse happened so fast.
Okay, so there's 2 questions. The first one dealt with what insights can we gather from the other drastic collapses in various other herring populations. So those dramatic crashes, a lot of them happened, especially in the Atlantic, because of overfishing. So basically, you had the development of these large, massive industrial fleets that really hammered the herring to the point where they cannot turn over fast enough or replenish. And so in the 1950s, before they could place like gear restrictions to kind of reduce their capabilities or capacity to catch so much, that's where a lot of it happened between the 50s and 70s. But going into the second question about like the herring collapse, where they weren't fished as hard, but it just had numerous like conflicting factors which I had gone through, and the idea like of this, I guess, inheritable like health condition, I have not seen that like as a major factor, because the lifespan of herring ranges between 7 and 8 years. So you would expect like the herring that were around at the oil spill, all of them would have died by the mid-90s or around the late 90s. But the thing was that the eggs that were laid down at the time of the oil spill were packed by the oil spill. And at 93, there was hardly any recruits. But there was also massive mortality events in adults, so you're thinking like a double whammy from, they're not getting the push from the bottom, but they're also getting pushed down from the top. So the thing is that there's just so many of these hypotheses that you are posed, and everybody has their idea of what's more important. And it's been in discussion for 20 years or more, and nobody can figure it out, and it's kind of like the data's already been collected, and so now it's just looking towards the future and trying to understand, okay, this